So my first order of business is to introduce our new member, James Reed. We had some correspondence with Coral Grout, and we had the opportunity to get together for an hour or so, a week or so ago, and do a little orientation. I didn't scare him away by showing him the year-to-dates. So that's
He went, ooh, fireplace material.
So I'm going to just ask James to give us a little bit of background and
Of course.
who you are and what you're doing, and
My name's James.
Into
and-
the,
Oh,
right
it's
into
fine.
the mic.
Hello?
you can pull it.
Oh, I can.
away.
Okay. Hi. So I moved to Winchendon in 2018. I bought a house with my wife. Currently, we have a 1-year-old son. I currently work in Gardner at Garlock for an inside sales position, and I'm currently at UMass Amherst finishing my degree in accounting. So, very happy to be here, and anything way I can help in this, in this committee, I'd definitely more than happy to do that. So,
Oh,
Welcome.
oh, thank you, James. And we're lucky, we have a pretty veteran crew on our committee, and so
That's his way of saying we're all old.
so there's a lot of people that you should feel free to give a call to if you got a question or something that doesn't make sense and you just want a little bit more background. Any one of us would be happy to help you out with that, because we've all gone through that process. Still going through the process, frankly. All right. So next on the agenda, I'd like to entertain motions to approve the minutes. We got 2 sets of minutes, October 11th and November 9th. So
I
we'll
make
take
a
them one at
motion.
a time.
I'll make a motion to approve the October 11th, 2022 minutes.
Second.
All right, motion is made and seconded. Any comments on the minutes? All right, James, we'll start with you, and you would abstain.
I abstain.
Okay. Mr. Guerrero?
I'm not sure if I
You
was
weren't, you weren't here,
Missed
Adrian.
that one, Adrian, right. And Chuck?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye, so we record that as a
302,
4-0-2.
402.
Yeah, I think we're only missing Bob tonight. All right, second set of minutes is November 9th.
I wasn't there.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the 9th.
All right.
Second.
Moved by Chuck, seconded by Dave. And again?
I abstain.
Abstain? Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So I think we have the same vote, just different people. Right. So year-to-date reports.
I had some questions on the school. Well, not questions, but just concerns. The substitute custodial for Toy Town, they're over budget by just under $1,600, and substitutes for custodial at Memorial is $5,000. So almost,
Where are you at, Mo? Where are you reading those?
the school,
The school? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
so just about $7,000 over budget for
For custodial?
substitutes. Yeah, and then the summer stipends for special education, negative 12,000, and that would be last summer.
Yeah, it seems to me that they, that account at the end of last year had a encumbrance.
The custodial Toy Town is page 19, Memorial is 26, and the special ed is 30.
Oh, yeah.
It's just,
Subs.
There's a nursing membership. I guess they're the dues, or is this travel expenses?
Yeah, typically that'd be dues to an
yeah.
the organization.
And they may have gone up, or they may have found another one that they joined or something, but just next time you're chatting with them, you might ask them.
Yeah. It's funny, I met with him yesterday with Superintendent King, and we talked about other things, but I hadn't picked that one out.
My biggest concern was the special ed stipends for summer school, because I'm thinking,
Yeah, the summer,
1,000 is a little high.
I know that one thing that Mr. King did say is that there are reclassifications that they have to do.
Yeah.
In fact, their business managers began on Monday.
Okay, they do have a new
So
one,
they have a new business manager.
so maybe we can look for some changes in the next,
So it'll be something to bring to your attention. I mean,
yeah.
the subs, why that much money? I get a feeling something else has been charged to subs,
Well, that's what I'm
perhaps.
thinking, especially just over 5,000 at Memorial. I'm like, goodness, how could they have
Yeah,
that much
holy-
already?
3 months into the school year.
I mean, unless they're having to pay full-time for somebody who's off on a workman's comp or something, I just don't understand that one.
Well, to be honest with you, even as an account, I'd like to go back and see if that's always been there.
I went back and I
Yeah.
didn't see, this jumped out as something different, so
Yeah. Yeah,
it could be that they
yeah. Well, I talked to town manager about a couple of things. One of the things that really caught my eye is the revenue report.
Mhm.
If you look at the revenue report, I mean, the major thing that was a concern is, the percent where we are this time of year compared to previous years. We're looking at 27.7%.
Yep,
And real estate taxes, which we're 2 payments into the year now, so that should be somewhere south of 50, but north of 40 at this stage of the year.
that's pretty low.
And that's very low. And the previous year, I think at this time of year, we're at 44%, 45%, so that would be typical. So my concern, I guess, was that revenues aren't being posted. He assured me that they are being posted, which was not necessarily the case last year. And they're being reconciled appropriately within the end of the month. But what we're seeing is the lack of the accountant, because it's the accountant that would set up the reports and update the reports to give us an up-to-date picture of the revenues. So I think what we're seeing is really not a clear picture of where the revenues are. And of course, what's scary is not having a clear picture as to where the revenues are.
My understanding is Ms. Grogan's coming back for 10 hours a week. Is that what you found out today?
I think that's what he's hoping,
Yeah.
but that doesn't, that's a short-term Band-Aid.
Yeah,
You get a full-time position, full-time accountant. If he can combine that with, some temporary help, temp agency, or somebody that can bring in
something.
some bookkeeping
Yeah.
skills that could be quick on the uptake, because really what you'd be looking for from Joanne, 10 hours a week, is somebody to give directions to somebody to do the grunt work.
Well, I'm even concerned with the tax reclassification, because that has to be approved. That hasn't been entered yet from after the Maytown meeting or the November town meeting.
Hmm.
So that'll have to be the first thing that Joanne does, so that the boss can approve
Yep.
it next Monday. And then it has to be certified by the town clerk before it's sent to state. We're kind of behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, we are, and in talking with Superintendent King yesterday, he pointed out that they have some grants that have come in recently, and there's nobody to set up the grant accounts, so that they're getting the money and depositing them, but he said the state's after him because it doesn't look like he's spending them. And of course, what he's got to do is use other money to pay for the real expenses that the grant's supposed to be covering. So
recoup it.
and that's going to require more reclassifications once the grants get set up. So I think we're really seeing some ripple effect from not having that position filled. And I know Justin's working on it as best he can, but it's something that we're really going to have to pay attention to, just to, not that as a committee we've got any authority over that, but as a committee, we're the ones that always ask the questions.
Yeah. Our job.
So, I'd suggest that we pay close attention to our year-to-dates and formulate those questions, and I think we'll be spending a little more time,
Well, and I think
either
the
between meetings or inviting the
Yeah.
town manager to the meeting, to answer questions that we might have about
And the
this.
comparison is important,
Yeah,
I think, at this point. I used to just go through them, but now I go back.
yeah. Your expenditures are pretty much up to date. I know that Deanna's been doing that, but that's been her job all along, I think. So I think that what we're seeing is that there are parts of the job that Joanne did, parts of the job that Deanna did. And we can't expect Deanna just to be able to pick up the other jobs. I mean, they're jobs you learn how to do.
Yeah,
And there's nobody there to teach her.
no.
So
And the other,
I was going to say, when Joanne was here, each month she was able to provide us with, sort of a cheat sheet, if you will, of what had not been reconciled, things that we might see that were out of line, that were going to be adjusted and fixed.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that with the shortage of help right now, there's a lot more of that could be going on that we're not going to see. It's not, the information's not going to be readily available to us.
Yeah,
So, I mean, it would be helpful if the town manager was able to at least provide some guidance on that each month, because I'm afraid that we're going to be looking at data that's just really not up to date.
right. And looking through the revenue report for this month, that's pretty clear.
Yeah,
It's
there's
just-
no way.
And then the other thing that caught me on the revenue report was that the first item, homeless transportation reimbursement,
yeah,
which is a new line item. In fact, it wasn't there in September. I think it popped up in October. And I don't understand, the $72,000, so it's expected that we're gonna get reimbursed $72,000. And yet, and then there's an adjustment of $52,000.
down to 20,000.
That I don't know.
Maybe that's something
That
the
got
school,
moved,
the
or-
school BA could, when she gets her feet wet, she'll be able to explain that.
Possibly, yeah. And it's an item that, of course, is on the town operating budget. The second item down is school transportation. But if you look at homeless, I mean, the budget, $75,000.
Yep,
That $4,610 that was actually encumbered at the end of last year, so that was added to it. And the only expenditure so far was that money that was expended, that was, encumbered last year. And I look back a couple years, and typically, in a typical year, there's been $6,000-7,000 expended out of that account. So it's which is fine at the end of the year. In fact, if there was $75,000 allocated, it creates some money for free cash, obviously. But if if the state's reimbursing us for our costs, it would be in the $7,500 range, not the $75,000 range. So anyway, I did talk with Justin about that a little bit, and he was gonna check with the town treasurer to see if we can come up with where that came from, why it came late.
Yep.
And it seems to me if you had $72,000 of anticipated revenue, then your bottom line got increased by $72,000 as well.
And I did notice we still don't have an account for solar funds.
No, and the solar funds,
That's going on 8
which-
years now that the funding article said,
right,
break the account.
and that amount, notice there's nothing in there right now for solar.
No.
It had been listed as payment in lieu of taxes
Yeah,
from the solar, because they're utilities, so they're not, they're exempt from property taxes, but they have an agreement with the town to pay. And what I learned, I think from Justin, was that's what the purpose, if you look at the tax and excise revenue on page 2 of the revenue report, personal property tax revenue, that's solar. Because what they can tax is the equipment. They can't tax the business, but they tax the equipment. So that's where they've been told to put that money in terms of a line item.
but we're supposed to, according to Article 16, 2015 town meeting, is to create a special capital stabilization fund to put that solar money into.
Yep. I don't know what they're gonna do with that. I
And
mean,
that still hasn't happened, so it's,
I don't know if there's a shelf life on a decision like that.
well, but that sort of sends the message that an article gets passed at town meeting and we don't like it, just ignore it long enough and it'll go away.
Or nobody gets assigned to deal with it.
Yeah.
I agree, there should be some decision, maybe it goes back on a warrant. It isn't something I would personally support, but,
No, but it was done and there was no.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I mean, it's a vote of the people, and at the time, that seemed like a good idea.
Yeah,
And maybe it needs to go on to undo it. I don't know. So you'll notice that for the personal property tax revenue,
so that's solar.
there's no money
No.
that's actually budgeted as a revenue. Same
Right.
thing with the cannabis revenue down the bottom of that section. And that's because there's no record, there's no history.
Yeah,
And, the town has to have some history so that the state, can look at what we've taken in over the years to make a decision as to whether the projecting for the next year is reasonable. Is there a track record that if you've been collecting $100,000 every year, that if you put 200 in, they're gonna say, well, wait a minute, where'd you come up with 200 if you only collect 100 every year? So next year, they'd have a couple years, a year and a half's record with the cannabis, and we'll see something added there. So right now, that $48,431 is what the town has collected through the state from sales for the bud barn. And that, certainly will help the bottom line as we work our way through the year.
And the new one is open now down by the harbor.
Yeah, yep, there's a new one, so. So the interesting question will be, how are they all gonna, are they
Yeah.
all drawing from the same straw? And the revenue doesn't really increase, they just split the business. I would expect there'd be some increase, but I don't think there'll be double the increase.
I think it's gonna be offset a bit by the fact that the prices are dropping dramatically in that market.
Yeah.
So even one more store minus the decrease in selling, we shouldn't plan on any tremendous growth in that area. It's, I think it's fragile.
I agree with you. I know that, one of the things we'll be looking at certainly as we begin to see projections for revenues for next year. Next month we'll be starting our discussions around FY '24 budget. And, I know that there's been some discussion about taking the cannabis money and dedicating it to capital or something along that line, particularly with the concern that the volume is definitely got to be subject to challenge if New Hampshire goes legal.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to make a big impact in terms of the
When,
revenue. So
not
if you,
if,
Yeah.
right?
my suggestion was that I think they'll need the revenue just to maintain the increase of cost of level services, and that better to lowball the projection, and then if you've got a good year, it goes into free cash, and then you use it for capital. But then the next year, if you've got an increase in your health insurance that you gotta cover, then you've got some leeway in terms of the revenue you're projecting. Well, so that'll be interesting to see where that comes out. A couple of things on the town expenses that I talked with him today about. One, there's a couple of positions where the chief retired, police chief retired, Chief Walsh,
Right.
and the administrative assistant in the town manager's office, who's going to stay on, I think, until the end of January.
Yeah.
So both of those line items are high right now, the expenditures. He knows he's going to have to cover some of those expenses. It may be that, and I guess there's a couple other retirements that are possible out there too. So he's aware of the fact that, that the expenditures for those line items are running high right now. I looked at the fire department overtime and DPW overtime. They were both high. Better than, they were about 60%, 65%, somewhere in that area. So those are a couple of line items that we need to be careful about. I think if you look at the water and sewer revenues, you're seeing some pretty low percentages too, but I get a feeling that's the same issue, that the bills are being collected, they're being processed, but it's not getting into the reports. Any other questions or thoughts about the year-to-date reports?
I don't think they're awake.
I do have a question, but it's not on these here. I'm curious, who oversees the ARPA funds?
The ARPA money.
Yeah, who oversees those funds? Is it the town manager that maintains the funds? Do we see a spreadsheet on what's been spent?
Yeah, we haven't.
How he uses those funds?
That's a good question, Adrian. I mean, I know that there's been some expenditures of the ARPA money. But I haven't seen a report that would suggest what the balance is. I know that there was some discussion about trying to preserve a portion of it, maybe $500,000 for the water line pipe that's got to be installed, and use that as one of the sources of money for that project. But I haven't seen anything in writing. I'll ask.
He could probably email us that, because I know he has one that's
yeah.
up to date, and
Okay.
I just looked, and I didn't.
I'll ask him to send it to us so we
Okay.
can take a look at that. The ARPA, James, is the federal money that, COVID-related, that came out a couple of years ago, and there was a time period where the town could spend the money, serious money, $3.6 billion. Used a lot of that money to subsidize really some of the big projects that were going on in town, Central Street, bridge repairs, road work. 'Cause it was really used to cover the shortfalls between what was approved and what the actual cost is, as the inflation, hit the construction business. ARPA, it's American Relief Something Act,
Yeah. Preservation.
but it was a serious amount of money.
ARPA.
Yeah. And last year, we were getting reports, every couple of months, really, kind of giving us up to date as to what had been approved. We had some thoughts about the approval process, but that's all they amounted to, were thoughts. Before I lose that. All right. So one of the things I included in your packet were the management letter from last year's audit report. Again, one of our goals was to kind of keep an eye on a couple of things. One were approvals for expenditures that were made at town meetings, both the May town meeting and the fall town meeting. And then the second was to ask questions periodically about the recommendations and highlights that the auditor reported to us in the management letter. Usually get two parts to an audit report. One is the management letter, which is kind of a verbal summary of the highlights of what the auditor found. And then the second is the financial reports, which is much more technical. So we kind of stay focused on the as a layperson, stay focused on the management letter. I had some discussion around the network security.
Yeah.
I think it's ironic that as the auditor put it, we continue to annually remind our communities to remain vigilant in the fight against cybercrime. And we were hit with an attack, a ransomware attack, midsummer, I guess it was, right after the beginning of the new fiscal year. And fortunately got through that with, I guess, in the big picture, minimal amount of damage and cost compared to what some municipalities have had to deal with. And what I asked the town manager was a report on it. If we could get a report that would identify some of the steps taken since, since that attack, that ransomware attack, and what some of the safety issues, cyber safety issues are that are being recommended for towns our size. And he agreed that he would work with the Director of Technology to do that. He said some steps have been taken, and there's probably more steps that need to be taken. But we're that close to a real disaster. It certainly behooves us to keep asking that question. What are we doing? How are we keeping the town safe in this cyber world?
They actually, I think it was 2019, because I was still chair of the audit committee when Mr. Roselli brought in a tech expert to review the school and the town tech departments. And they gave a detailed report on what needed to happen to keep them safe. The school did. The town, I guess, didn't get around to it. And I forwarded that report to Mr. Saltzbeck, so he does have it now.
The next section of the informal items were the long-term obligations. I think as a committee, we've been pretty proactive with addressing some of these issues, particularly with the OPEB liability, and having the Board of Selectmen, approve our policies and the updates that we've made to the policies last year. So we're in better shape. I get the feeling that Tony didn't know that we had initiated the OPEB.
Yeah, I think that he wasn't aware of that, or he would have corrected that.
Yeah, and the Worcester County Regional Pension System,
Yep.
I think that they're on top of the fact that they're behind in terms of their investments. And I think they have a 15-year plan to increase the pension payment every year. And so we can expect a major increase of at least 5% or better each year. And you project that out over 15 years, it gives you some idea of how much additional money has to go into that pension system. And it raises the question around another goal that we have is trying to do some projections on some of these fixed costs that are only going to increase, and start thinking about how we're going to cover these increased costs along with maintaining the services to the community. That's going to be a challenge the next few years. I know that Tony had talked about adding a pension fund. We do pay into the pension system, and I think the pension system, Worcester County pension system, is addressing the need to increase that cost to build up their, it's a technical term for it, but their ability to provide the pensions that are due employees today when they retire tomorrow. Cash reconciliation, we talked about this a little bit with the year-to-dates. And again, town manager seems to feel that in the collector treasurer's office, they've made improvements, and they're reconciling revenues on a monthly basis and on a timely basis. He pointed out that, this is an audit for FY '21, so it's been 2 years, and that they've instituted better guidelines, I guess, or checkpoints to make sure that the cash reconciliation is being done. Next one's a school issue, the compensated absences. Tax title is a repeated suggestion, has to do with some small pieces of property that the town has and has not done anything with for several years. Payroll audit. I didn't talk to him about that.
That's a repeat
Yeah,
many times.
yeah. The last one I talked to him about was the town inventory, town capital.
Capital assets.
Capital assets. And that's another one, he said, maybe in 2021, they weren't up to date. And it wasn't so much that new assets weren't being added. The issue that Tony identified was that older assets that were dropped or sold
Yeah.
weren't being subtracted. But he said that they've got, a new program. The state has a software program that they're using. And it seems to me you said that Brian's got some software that
Yep.
he's using at the DPW. So he felt that's one that, if Tony looked at it today, it would look in much better shape than it did 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Any other questions about the audit? So we talked about getting a report, really a report on the cyber attack that we had with recommendations to beef up cybersecurity for the town. So that's something we'll need to follow up on as we move along.
And Mr. Courts, we have an audit committee tomorrow night, do we?
Tomorrow night at 6 o'clock.
And that's to look at auditing firms that have applied?
That is correct. Yep, so that way we'll make our recommendations so that the Board of Selectmen's meeting on Monday can,
The 19th, that we can hopefully have one in place?
Yep.
Good.
Yeah, because Roselli's doing it again this year, right?
yes,
Yeah.
Well, last year,
he did it last year.
FY '22.
He was granted an extension to be able to do it last year, but we needed a new,
For FY '23.
Okay,
a
for
new,
FY
we needed a new contract, basically.
Because he's doing FY '22,
Yeah.
a completed year. Yeah, and so next year, we would be, so we would need to put an RFP out.
It's out.
We did.
Oh,
We
it's
already
already out.
put one out,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah,
And so our
they're-
meeting
Good.
tomorrow night is
They're
to,
due in, so it's to review the applications tomorrow.
Okay, I get it, yeah, good. Yeah, and certainly, I mean, I think we've all been very comfortable with Tony Roselli's company, but it's just good practice to switch your auditors periodically. And, I think, one reason we haven't is because we were working our way through the deficit
Yeah.
crisis, and didn't seem like to be the best time to switch horses.
No, and then with all the changes in personnel and no accountant and a new treasurer, and
Yeah,
it's like,
need some consistency.
we're kind of in the middle of it again.
We are. We are. All right. January tri-board meeting. It's going to be held on Tuesday, January 10th. It's typically the meeting where the town manager will present his forecasts, 5-year forecasts for expenditures and revenues. Sort of officially kicks off the budget season. And we'll be hosting that meeting.
But will our audit be ready then? Because that tri-board meeting in January is also when they present the audit findings to us, so that we know before we go into budget season what we need to look at.
Yeah, well, that would be helpful. Will it? I don't know.
So if it's not ready, should we maybe make the tri-board the 24th or something?
I don't know. I don't know what kind of a delay that puts in,
I was talking to
if
Mr.
any, if
yeah.
any.
Well, I'm talking to Mr. Roselli, he said that he would expect early to mid-January, so even the 17th, if we told him that was our deadline, he might be able to do it, but I'm thinking the 10th might be really pushing him.
All right. I will see if it's, I'll talk with Justin and see if that's possible.
Because we have in the past, our tri-board in January is usually the last week of January, first week of February. It's never on our second Monday.
Well, last year we had it on that day.
I know, but we didn't have any audit till June. But now we are looking at actually
We're trying to
having one.
remember who hosts which meeting. you
Yeah.
know?
And that's the reason that FinCom usually
So
does
when I
host
saw it
it.
was on a Tuesday last year,
Yeah.
I knew we must have hosted it. Okay, I'll have some discussion with.
I'm just thinking that would be pertinent to a tri-board to have that,
Yeah,
because then we would have answers from the school as well.
and, as I said, I think the other part of it is just whether or not it pushes back decision-making around the budget. Maybe it doesn't, but, because typically we start with the projections. We're not gonna have any kind of detail in a proposed budget for next year. That's what the town manager really is working on now, I would imagine.
I would hope.
But I wouldn't expect them to have something to present to us until late February, early March.
Yeah,
Typically, it's early March when we get a look at where he's at. All right,
so if we could do the 17th or 24th, that would be my preference, just because I think it's really important we have that audit report.
yeah. I think, well, let me talk to him about it. And, we'll see what our options are, see if we can get some sort of assurance from, I think part of it depends on whether you get some sort of window that Roselli says, you know, it'll be in that window, no later than.
No
you
later
know.
than.
Yeah. All right. Any committee comments? Couple of things that I sent you all, I forwarded you the email I got from,
Sounds like the windows are open,
close the
doesn't it?
windows?
Wow.
From Wendy, about, needing to review the open meeting law online, the
Ethics.
conflict of interest law and the ethics. She sent an email out, I forwarded it to everybody. She had some attachments that you needed to sign and turn in that basically said, yes, I read this. And then every couple of years, you have to do the little tutorial on the DOR website. And she had a link for that in the email as well. I had to stop in and ask her if, I remember taking that test several times, but I didn't know if it was good. I think it's been 3 years since I had taken it, so. So if you're not sure, you could just check with Wendy. She'll have a record of if you took it last year.
And if you do go in there, it gives you two options. You're a municipal employee.
Yeah, yeah, not a town or, right, state employee. You know, I mean, even though it's a volunteer, we're considered employees of the town.
Get that big check at the end.
James, do you remember that email?
Yeah, I did
Okay.
complete that already. so-
Okay, good, good. And you've obviously gone into the town clerk's office and been sworn in and all
I
that
have, yes.
good stuff, yeah, I thought, okay. So, then the other thing I wanted to let you know, I don't know, is the MMA conference is scheduled for, I think it's the third weekend in January, in Boston. It's a big conference, 2-day, usually a Friday and a Saturday, and full of workshops, some speakers. It can be very informative. I've gone several times and found it certainly worthwhile. And we do have, some funds available to reimburse people for expenses. I think the cost of the conference is a couple $100, and if you stay overnight at the hotel there, there's a special rate for conferees. And essentially, if there's more people to go than there is money to cover, then we just reimburse it, prorate it, so it's something that might not cost anything, it might cost you something. But we've got, some money in there, and so it's something to see. I don't know if you've all gotten correspondence from Mass Municipal Association?
No.
All right, then I will, I'll forward you
The link?
the link to it. I don't know how, if I'm supposed to be sending something in, the list, the town's supposed to send something in to MMA with a list of all the board members,
It seems to
committee
just come
members?
to the chair each time, and then you usually send it out to us, so.
Yeah. I mean, I get the, anyway, I'll send that out to you. And see if I can maybe contact them and just give them a list of the
That would be
active
good.
members, so
Yeah.
that, there's a name there, to Winchendon. But in any event, I will, MMA stands for Massachusetts Municipal Association. All right. Anything else? No? Any comments from the public?
Wake up back there. I'd just like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, have a safe and healthy holiday, and
Yeah.
Yes,
Same to
yes,
you.
happy holidays.
You?
And,
I move to adjourn at 7:20.
7:20.